Team Vice President-elect Mike Pence are meeting at Trump Tower as speculation swirls that possible cabinet picks may be imminent. All this as we learn that Dr. Ben Carson has just said to have taken his name out of consideration as what we're learning for any role in the administration per se. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Sandra Smith, Meghan McCain, host of Kennedy on Fox Business, Kennedy herself, and today's hashtag One Lucky Guy. We welcome back Fox News digital politics editor and co-host of I'll Tell You What, Chris Steyerwalt. And he says it just like that. You're outnumbered. Good to have you.
Tell you what, I'm glad to be here.
You're already what? It's good to have you.
Well, it's fun. This is like how I know that life is working out, because I get to do this for a job, right?
Oh my gosh.
This is pretty cool.
The sign?
Yeah.
I love being part of the sign, right?
Why not?
Okay.
Always good to have.
They're everywhere if you pay attention.
Oh, I love that. Oh, let's end right there. Nope,
Yeah, good show. Good run.
All right, the Trump White House is taking shape. And before we get to the breaking development of Dr. Ben Carson that I just mentioned bowing out of consideration, the mounting speculation about who the president-elect wants in his cabinet. A senior Trump transition official says former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani is a favorite for Secretary of State. But a second official cautions John Bolton, the former ambassador to the United Nations, is also being considered. Giuliani was asked about the rumors, including another one that he could be tapped for Attorney General. Watch.
First of all, I won't be Attorney General.
You won't be Attorney General.
So good, I won't have to decide that one, thank God.
Made that clear. The choice for Secretary of State in the Trump administration is down to Rudolph Giuliani and John Bolton. We don't have John Bolton here tonight, so I'm going to ask you some questions about...
John would be a very good choice.
Is there anybody better?
Maybe me, I don't know.
Well, earlier today, Ambassador Bolton was also asked about being the nation's top diplomat.
Would you want to be the U.S. Secretary of State? Let's start there.
Well, you know, I'm kind of old school on this business. It's been an honor to serve the country. I've said, I'll say it again, it would be an honor to serve the country again, but ultimately this is the president-elect's decision. I don't think it's appropriate to talk about it in public. In God's good time, he'll make up his mind, and then we'll all move on.
I get it. Have you talked to him about it, sir?
I have not.
I do know who wants to be the chief political correspondent for Fox News. That's Carl Cameron. Carl, good to see you.
Hi, Harris. And it is no secret that Rudy Giuliani wants to be the Secretary of State. He has been lobbying hard for it. And Mr. Bolton has a number of other opportunities, including National Security Council, a variety of spots for someone who's a runner-up. But it does appear as though Rudy Giuliani is making it pretty public known that he wants the job and even perhaps expects to get it. Don't want to get too ahead of your skis on this sort of thing, and that's why Mr. Bolton was saying best to be old school and keep it to yourself and not lobby in public. Having said that, Dr. Ben Carson, who was eyeing Health and Human Services Secretary, has decided that he would be better service to Donald Trump were he to not be in the administration. Now, he had been talked about as HHS Secretary. Of course, he's a noted neurosurgeon and a lifelong physician, world-renowned. He was also discussed as a possible education secretary. And in the end, the HHS job is a monster of a bureaucracy. And having been a neurosurgeon of such acclaim and being focused specifically on that end of medicine for the years, there may have been a consideration that he doesn't have the kind of experience running a bureaucracy as huge as Health and Human Services, particularly when there will be changes to the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. So Ben Carson looks like he would be a senior advisor from the outside as opposed to the inside. And there are a number of other names that are rapidly emerging. Steve Mnuchin, who was the finance chairman for the Trump campaign, is now looking like a very, very serious potential pick for the Treasury Department. The campaign, now the president-elect's transition administration, is already trying to figure out what they're going to do in their first 100 and 200 days. And there's a draft memo that's been circulated that in effect says that over the course of the first 200 days, they will look at all of the trade deals that Donald Trump said he felt were not America first enough, and that there will be revisions and reforms and perhaps even some renegotiations of all of these types of trade deals, whether it's the Trans-Pacific Partnership or NAFTA, so as to better strengthen the U.S. position with our trading partners around the world. This was a huge, huge campaign promise by the candidate, and it appears as though the president-elect is moving forward aggressively to make sure that the first 100 days really do deal with trade.
Carl Cameron, thank you very much. You have teed it up for us perfectly. Now we'll unpack some of that. Have a great day, my friend. Chris, That is a lot to chew on. Let's start, though, with the most recent news about Dr. Ben Carson. And you were nodding, as Carl was saying, what a bureaucracy that the program HHS is.
Running, putting a renowned surgeon in charge of DHHS would be like saying that somebody should run a sporting goods store because they played baseball, or that because somebody really likes to drink, they ought to run a bar.
Or the biggest sporting goods store.
The attributes that go with success, I want you to think about it this way first. The federal executive branch comprises about 2 million human beings.
Wow.
So of those and these are the civilians, this is leaving aside the Army. You take those 2 million human beings, 1,950,000 of them are there no matter what. They're civil servants.
Okay.
They're in unions, many of them. They are governed by...
You can't touch them.
You can't really touch them. You can't tell them to go...
Hammer.
Right, you can't touch them.
I
Right.
can't believe I started that.
I believe it. I believe it.
Sad.
I have hammer pants, but I left them in makeup. So
I can't touch that either. Please move on.
So you picture this aircraft carrier slicing through the ocean. It's this enormous thing. Now, 50,000 of the people basically are will and pleasure employees of the president. You don't have to replace them all at once. But then there's 4,000 at the very top that you must replace, that they're all gone. These are the people that are the secretaries and the undersecretary and the deputy undersecretary and all those folks. So you got to fill in those people.
That's what he's working on right now.
That's what they're working on right now. What's important with these people, yes, is that they are ideologically attuned to you. But what's even more important than that is that they know how to do what they're doing, because the bureaucracy exists to defeat the people who come in to try to change it.
Wow, everything you just said makes people hate government even more.
Yeah.
But we love you. So, Kennedy, I mean, if you can only really move about 50,000 of these people out of 2 million, that describes and explains why it's so hard to get stuff to do. So it's even more important, I would think, that Donald Trump work with this bicameral, this rarity that he has right now on the Hill.
And he has to take the frustration that he's had with bureaucracy, with the bloated federal government, and now appoint and instill in the people who are going to succeed those posts the absolute mandate that wherever they are, whatever their domain, they have to limit the size and scope of government. And that's why I would actually like to see someone like Ben Carson, who has been such an active opponent of Obamacare, in that position at Health and Human Services.
Yeah, but you know what they do to him.
Well, yes, they would cannibalize him with his own scalpel. I understand that.
My goodness gracious. Well, you know, and
that's a rough crowd.
No, but having said that, I think there's something really important about those people who are ideologically, philosophically limited government, people who talk about eliminating entire departments like commerce and education. Also, put those people in charge and see how much traction they can get.
The component that I'm curious about now, though, is can we get down to the nitty-gritty of the actual people that are being looked at, Rudy Giuliani and Ambassador Bolton, and just get your thoughts, Megan.
Well, I'm a foreign policy hawk, and so these two people are people I really like possibly taking over this position. That being said, Ambassador John Bolton wrote an op-ed talking about how he thought we should bomb Iran to stop their nuclear program. If you're somebody like Kennedy right now, Rand Paul has already come out saying he doesn't like these two choices.
Filibuster.
So libertarians are going to go crazy over this. And it's fascinating to me because Donald Trump's foreign policy is something that takes some unpacking, and it's a little tricky, and I want to see what happens in the first 100 days. And these two men are people that are, quite frankly, more ideologically aligned with people like me.
Chris, based on who has been chosen so far, and all we can really look at is Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon, and then looking at who we're speculating he's going to pick, what are you making so far of what Donald Trump and how Donald Trump is performing as far as his picks?
So the most important choice so far on Donald Trump's part is Mike Pence to take over the transition team.
Is that a good idea?
Well, it's better than having Chris Christie getting waylaid in Washington. I think that there's probably some internal conflicts inside the organization between Jared Kushner's father
away in jail.
There's icky parts there, but there's also the thing that the Bridgegate trials were Ivanka Trump's husband.
Ivanka's father-in-law is rotting in jail because of Chris Christie.
Yes, that's a way you could put it, and that did not make for happy times inside the organization. Yes, as one does. But the other thing is Pence provides knowledge. He spent 12 years in Washington. He was a senior official in the Congress. He was in the Republican leadership. He understands how this works, and he also knows where to go find the people, because as we were saying before, as much as conservatives say torch this thing, burn it down.
Drain the swamp.
That's exactly how
Will there be swamp draining, though, if you have a Washington
So you have to find the balance, because if you come in and, as you said before, get out over your skis and you're trying to do too much, the bureaucracy will defeat you like that, because they'll say, oh, you don't know how to do this. What you need are people. If you really want to make the changes that Donald Trump's talking about, you have to hope that somebody like Mike Pence can identify the individuals who are gifted enough to execute the policies without getting
well, and then there's talk of Steve
Munchin,
a 17-year veteran of Goldman Sachs. Remember the things that Donald Trump said on the campaign trail about Goldman Sachs.
The global elite.
I mean,
would he choose him for Treasury Secretary is the question.
Before
we scoot on, I want to pick your brain just real quickly, Megan.
Sure.
Because you have been with your father as he has chosen staff as a senator, and just how important these few weeks are leading up. 66 days.
It's deeply personal. I mean, a lot of this has to do with loyalty and loyalty along the campaign trail. I'm not terribly surprised by anyone that's been, talked about joining the administration. These are his closest advisors, the people he's going to trust in really intense times, particularly Secretary of State. They're, the biggest diplomat the United States has. So it's incredibly important, given the threats of terror globally, it's incredibly important that he trusts them. And I like these two choices. I really like Ambassador Bolton or Giuliani.
Well, just a short time ago, President Obama again rejected claims that the election was a repudiation of his policies one day after taking what seemed to be a veiled jab at Hillary Clinton. Are you umming? Well, what President Obama said about Clinton and whether he has a point. Mr. Obama also has a message for Americans who are angry about their newly elected leader. Essentially telling them, get over it, because that's how democracy works. Will they listen and give Mr. Trump a chance? And there is more. When the TV version of us wraps up, we pop up online, foxnews.com/outnumbered. Click on the Overtime tab, and you can jump on the live chat, you can talk to us directly, and you can watch us live and Facebook Live. Our handle is Outnumbered FNC. We're all over the place. We'll be waiting for you there. And right here, stay close.
President Obama appearing to take a veiled shot at Hillary Clinton during his first news conference since the election. The president suggesting Clinton lost because she failed to, quote, show up everywhere and reach out to white non-urban voters, and also mentioning his own experience barnstorming in Iowa during his campaign.
I believe that we have better ideas, but I also believe that good ideas don't matter if people don't hear them. We have to show up everywhere. We have to work at a grassroots level, something that's been a running thread in my career. I won Iowa not because the demographics dictated that I would win Iowa. It was because I spent 87 days going to every small town and fair and fish fry and VFW hall.
And in a news conference earlier today with the Greek Prime Minister, the president saying the election was not a repudiation of him or his policies.
People seem to think I did a pretty good job. And so there is this mismatch, I think, between frustration and anger. Perhaps the view of the American people is that you just need to shake things up. And I think that's going to be an interesting test, because I think I can make a pretty strong argument that the policies we put forward were the right ones, that we've grown faster than just about any advanced economy. The country is indisputably better off, and those folks who voted for the president-elect are better off than they were when I came into office, for the most part.
So it couldn't have been him, right, Chris?
Well, now, he has a point.
Okay.
And his point, well made, is he has a 57% job approval rating today, which is the highest since 2009. He is much more popular, not much more popular, but he's substantially more popular now at this point in his term than Ronald Reagan was at this point in his. So that is true. That is, as we would say back home, a true fact. But also, the counties that Donald Trump won, the places where Donald Trump won the election, were places that people had voted for Barack Obama twice. A lot of these places, a third of the counties that Obama won switched and voted for Trump. And we saw, especially in the upper Midwest, we saw in places that look like the place where I grew up in Ohio County, West Virginia, that people went 20 and 25-point swings from Obama to Trump. This tells us something. And what it tells me is that the hunger for change and the desire for something different in Washington is present and unslaked. The thirst is real. They want this. It is out there, and Obama promised it, was only able to deliver some relatively small parts of it, but the desire is still there.
Okay, but there are two things here that I think are really important. Number one, he is so incredibly condescending.
Yes.
When he talks about how people's lives are better off. That is so rude, and that's one of the reasons that Democrats lost, is because they're incredibly out of touch with a big part of the country that they have completely written off. And he's absolutely right. When he talks about a demographic that, is not necessarily tailor-made for you, you still have to go out there and talk to those people. He did that. He's saying she didn't do that because he actively despises her. He's mad at her for losing this election. He feels like he set the table for her, did everything possible. His wife was an incredible surrogate, and she still lost the election.
And then Megyn, he's basically saying she just didn't work hard enough.
I actually think that's terrible. I mean, she didn't work hard enough, but there's no need. I mean, that woman's in pain right now. I don't love the Clintons, but there's really, I'm sorry, this isn't her. This is subjective, but I didn't like the way he talked about that. I actually think it's kind of unprofessional. That being said, I'm happy the way he's treating Donald Trump. Wax poetic all you want about numbers. This was a huge rejection not only of Obama's policies, but of liberal culture as well. And I think that's the factor in this that the media continues to miss. There's many people, many traditional Democrats who voted for President Obama, who think that, the liberals only care about the elites, about the agenda of people in San Francisco and people in New York City. Right. And I think it's a cultural shift as well that he seems not to be able to recognize. Do you know who does recognize it? Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
He did an interview on CBS where he was saying, I come from these areas, I come from blue-collar, white working-class communities, and his quote was, "It breaks my heart. We no longer are reaching out to these people."
Yeah, he says his party doesn't know how to reach them.
All right, so speaking of those angry voters, President Obama also has a message for Americans who are angry and concerned about President-elect Trump's victory.
The people have spoken. Donald Trump will be the next president, the 45th president of the United States. And it will be up to him to set up a team that he thinks will serve him well and reflect his policies. Those who didn't vote for him have to recognize that that's how democracy works. That's how this system operates.
A lot of Americans happy to see our president stepping up and saying it's time to unite.
Well, he had to do that because it had gotten violent. I mean, it's he had to do that. I think he should have done it days ago. He spoke again from Greece today, and he said some of the same things. But, now is the time for Americans to do what they always have done historically and do the WIFM. What's in it for me? Right. They have got to look at, and I know how much you like acronyms. You're the only person on the couch who got that.
I do like that one.
So it's time to look at this, no matter how you voted, as we do each time as a country, and figure out what makes your life better out of all the changes that are coming, and really engage, because I would like to take a litmus test. How many of those people in the streets threatening to get violent have even voted?
Okay, so he
voted for Jill Stein.
So I was walking out of the building up here in New York Wednesday last, and I did not know that there were going to be, and I tell you, the smell of pot smoke as it rolled down 6th Avenue with these protesters was, I wanted to linger. I thought I might get a contact high.
Oh my gosh.
But as these people are coming down 6th Avenue and this is what democracy looks like, and they're screaming, and so there's this fella standing next to me on the corner, and I was just going out for dinner. There's this fella standing next to me on the corner. I said, "Do you think we should tell them that the election was on Tuesday?" Because that's when you vote. It doesn't matter if you go protest. Right. That's when the vote was. And I think part of the anger and part of the misunderstanding here is that just because your feelings are hurt or just because you don't like the outcome, and I think that's what Obama's saying. I think that's what Bernie Sanders is very much saying, which is, okay, now you got to get in the harness and you got to pull.
But I echo what Megyn said. You hit the nail on the head. They were letting the media do the dirty work for them.
They are.
And tell them how to vote and tell them how to think.
But so he can tell them to stop being angry. But will they? Will we see an end to these protests and the anger that we see across the country?
I think we might see an end of the protest just as a function of weather, because it's going to start getting cold in places like the Northeast and the Northwest. In Portland, Oregon, my hometown, has really just turned into quite a manure storm.
But can't we say that some of these people will go protest a haircut? They don't care.
Yeah, no, it's the Occupy Wall Street professional
These are
protesters,
professional protesters.
And that's their job. That's what they do. They're looking for reasons to be angry. It's the people you're no longer friends with because they're such drama queens. They're always breaking up with people and losing their jobs, and you no longer want to hear about it. So now they just take that negative energy and they impose it on politics. politics. There is a need in this country for peaceful protest. You can't do that in other parts of the world. We can do that here. People should do that.
And many other
but you know what? When it gets violent, when you're lobbing fiery bricks at cops, that's when we have to draw a line. And the president had to say something.
And pulling Trump supporters out of their car. I mean, that's another thing we talked about yesterday.
All right, President-elect Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin speaking by phone about the future of U.S.-Russia ties. Mr. Trump saying he looks forward to a strong and enduring relationship with the Kremlin. But can Putin be trusted to be a friend to America? And a GOP senator says most Republicans in Congress are behind the president-elect. But Democrats are reportedly hoping to exploit divisions between Mr. Trump and conservatives on Capitol Hill. How all of this could play out.
President-elect Trump getting a phone call from Russian President Vladimir Putin. According to a statement from the Trump camp, Putin congratulated him on his victory, and the two talked about their shared threats, economic issues, and the future of the U.S. relationship with Russia. The call coming after a campaign dogged by accusations of Russian hacking during the election and praises from Mr. Trump for the Russian leader. The Kremlin saying today, quote, the two are not due to meet before the president-elect takes office. So Putin obviously longing for the days of Mother Russia, wants to become a superpower again. Is Donald Trump going to help him do that?
Look, the fraught relationship between the United States and Russia is not going to end no matter how good the relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin is, simply because the strategic interests of the two countries differ too broadly. There are obviously points of agreement, and George W. Bush and Barack Obama both found ways to do that, right? There are places where you have overlap, where the Venn diagrams of the national interests overlap, but broadly speaking, Putin makes his bread and butter off of making people in Russia hate the United States. One of the keystones, when people have praised, when Trump praised Putin's high approval ratings in Russia, a lot of that is based on him saying the outsiders, the Westerners, hate us and want us to fail. The reason our economy stinks, the reason we can't get imports of the things that we want, the reason we have these problems is because of these decadent Westerners and these horrible people and these Americans. So now we have an interesting dance. If Donald Trump is really Vladimir Putin's friend, and Russia and the United States become allies, who are they going to blame?
But that's the point, though. If he's really his friend, we would always have to question that relationship, even if it looked like a good friendship, whether or not it was real.
Remember when Bush said, I looked into his eye? And
but here's
what did he see?
He saw his soul. Saw the man's soul. It was like a black Frito. It was like a little crisp of a crust. But remember this also, and I think this is really important. You say to become a superpower, to return to being a superpower. If you're a Russia, there's a theory of Moscow as the third Rome, the true protector of the Christian faith. And there's also the idea that great Russia, this great and powerful state that counterbalances, they don't think they're not a superpower. They believe they are a superpower. And when they act on the world stage, they act in that fashion.
But you have to have an enemy to keep that model going. In order to keep miserable people loyal to you, you have to have foil.
And vodka.
They do the exact same thing in North Korea. And so,
with less vodka.
If the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, if Russia becomes, I can't believe I just said that, it's the Romanian enemy. If Russia actually becomes a tight ally with the United States, they have to become a democracy and allow the economic floodgates.
That's what happened to the James Bond series. That's why, I mean, Spectre didn't have fight anymore.
And they also had the one guy who cried.
Blood.
But there's still a lot of Republicans that look at Putin, unlike Bush, and see a K, a G, and a B in his eyes. So there are two different schools of thought in the Republican Party right now.
My prediction would be that in the end, the Russian goal was not to elect Donald Trump president, as Democrats alleged, but in fact that the goal was to destabilize the United States. And I just bet that right about the time that the Republicans and Trump say, boy, Russia's really great, that's when he's going to go, oh, there are other WikiLeaks here.
Okay, but
we have some other stuff.
Yeah, but what about John Bolton? I mean, here's a question. What about John Bolton? Because you have someone who's very hawkish, not only toward Iran, but also toward Russia.
Absolutely.
And you have the president-elect who is extending admiration and an olive branch. Is there a tension there that is
like
insurmountable?
A good cop, bad cop type
you could
situation?
do that.
Just how you reconcile these two things, which is why Bolton seems like a strange choice if you go on the past relationship with Donald Trump and Putin.
Can I ask just a basic question? So there's a Washington Post article that's really good. It talks about Donald Trump this week getting the deepest secrets of America. And I wonder, does that change also who he chooses for all of these positions, particularly for the defense secretary?
I know people who have been involved in the briefings, and it's an O-S word briefing, and they don't say S word, they say the actual word. Oh, yes.
Orange Swan?
Or O Swan. The briefing that the president-elect gets, where they say basically, yeah, that's where we buried the alien. This is the nuclear base on the dark side of the moon.
What happened with Roswell.
Right. This is all of the bad stuff that we did. This is all the bad stuff people did to us. This is the stuff. These are our real capabilities. And the hope is that in each time, especially in the era of global thermonuclear war, that each president goes, oh, Swan, let's be careful about what we do, and that this is part of the part of the stealing of the person's core.
We're going to teach you how to cuss in the break.
All right.
No, not really. I'm kidding.
All right. If Trump wants to tell me about Roswell, I'm all open. All right. Meantime, Republican leaders say they are ready to enact President-elect Trump's agenda, but the Democrats are insisting that they will have a say too. Now, word on how the Dems are planning to get between the new president and his party. Could this actually happen?
Congress has begun a lame duck session with Republican leaders declaring they are strongly aligned with President-elect Donald Trump. House Speaker Paul Ryan, who initially, you may recall, refused to endorse Trump, told GOP lawmakers that it is time to hit the ground running and join forces with the new Trump administration. A jubilant Speaker Ryan a short time ago.
Welcome to the dawn of a new, unified Republican government. Feels really good to say that, actually. This will be a government focused on turning President-elect Trump's victory into real progress for the American people. Our team is very excited, and we cannot wait to get to work. At the same time, we recognize that the task ahead of us is enormous. If we're going to put our country back on the right track, we have got to be bold, and we have to go big. This country is expecting absolutely no less.
Meanwhile, Politico, the website, is reporting Democrats are hoping to take full advantage of any possible fracture within the GOP to advance their own agenda. Here's a quote from them. The outline of a Democratic strategy for dealing with Donald Trump is beginning to take shape. They're thinking exploit the inevitable divisions between Trump and the increasingly conservative GOP leadership over tax policy, infrastructure, spending, and possibly social issues, end quote. Meghan McCain, your thoughts?
Yes. I think this is wishful thinking on the left. I'm sorry, but for many of us, the last 8 years has been leftist hell. And don't underestimate how many of us, even those of us who were critics of Donald Trump, that want the next 4 years to be really prosperous. We want to repeal Obamacare. And I actually think so far, I see a lot of hope in Donald Trump reaching out to people who, originally didn't support him. I actually see Republicans working together. The last thing I want is to repeat history, which just happened with Democrats, this complete rejection because they failed over and over again for so long. So I actually think they can try, but look in your own house right now with the divisions in the DNC over people who supported Hillary and Bernie Sanders before looking at mine.
What was really an amazing part of that press conference that Speaker Ryan just gave was he went from just saying Republicans need to unite and hit the ground running to defending Donald Trump. He was asked by one of the reporters, do you trust that Donald Trump can make the right choices when assembling his administration? And he said, stop. This is a multi-billionaire who has employed tens of thousands of people over the course of his business career. He's had to surround himself with smart people and people who make good choices, and he's had to make them himself. So I saw that as a big change for Speaker Ryan, because he barely mentioned his name before when he said he was going to be supporting.
Sure, and maybe a way to think about it is a threshold. Donald Trump as a businessman did some things. Donald Trump as a presidential candidate did some things. But as president-elect, he's only done a few things. And now the job and I think this is in keeping with what President Obama has been repeatedly saying, which is it's up to the citizenry and also the leaders in Congress to judge Donald Trump as president-elect based on what he does as president-elect. We're
already doing that.
Well, right, but that is our job, right? It is our job to judge him based on what he does henceforth. But also there is the manumission. There is also the forgiveness that comes. It says, okay, this was the threshold. You must be this tall to ride this ride. You are that tall. You are now the president-elect. Now let's start anew.
So, Kennedy, I want to talk for just a moment, because that's what this segment is about, the Democrats trying to take advantage of something that's happening within the other party.
Yeah.
They have so many problems of their own. And
Yes.
I would imagine, and I thought about this as the president was speaking from Greece more so than his news conference yesterday, that, and I will get to my question in a second, I promise. But I thought about this, that it's part of his legacy now. If they don't take a look at the stick in their own eye, to talk biblically, before they look at their neighbors.
Yeah, and I don't think that that President Obama or Secretary Clinton were planning on an autopsy of their party at this point.
Right.
I think that's one of the things that has caught them so off guard.
Word.
Is while she was planning on filling the 4,000 positions that Chris talked about earlier in the show, which she has been doing for months,
Or
what
leaving
she
some of them
really
be.
has to do, and she has forced the party to do, especially people like Nancy Pelosi, is to really take stock
Dang on.
and how they have alienated so many voters across the country, and how their elitist agenda, their big government agenda, is not only out of touch, it has failed so many people. The election really could have gone either way. Republicans might be having this conversation. They're not. They're having a celebration, and the Democrats are forced to go back to square one and figure out how do we get the Bernies and the Elizabeths
Yeah, but
back
it's hard
into the
for
fold.
it's hard for me to believe. I mean, you and I were on the floor at the DNC. I say this all the time. We saw people in tears. It's hard for
I
me
said,
to
go over to
believe-
California.
I know. You're like, go over there. They're really crying. It's hard to believe that even if she had won, that they wouldn't be doing that same kind of soul searching, because
Also,
that's
You're
not going to be a
100%
mandate either.
A lot can be
100%
forgiven
100%
and
right.
rationalized.
But a lot of
in
Democrats
victory.
feel betrayed, which is something that Republicans, I don't feel at this time. I don't feel betrayed. I think it took a different direction than I originally would have thought. I don't feel betrayed. People, when you have these people screaming at Donna Brazile at the DNC saying, now I'm going to have 40 years off my life because of climate change, which someone did to her. You've got problems in your own house right now. And again, I just find it arrogant and really wishful thinking that you think there's any
That's
disarray
politics.
right now.
That's what they're best at.
But
All
it's
right,
bad
we'll move
spin.
on. This is fun. Students and faculty at some Ivy League schools are pushing to create sanctuary campuses. That would be free of deportations under President-elect Trump's policies. Would these universities be defying immigration law? And could they get away with it? That's a bigger question, too.
So I went to one of those schools. Folks at some of our nation's top universities pushing to make their campuses sanctuaries for illegal immigrants who could face deportation under a Trump presidency. Students and faculty launching campaigns at schools like Harvard, Yale, Columbia, and Brown, where some alumni wrote a letter to school leaders saying in part, quote, Trump's presidency puts the undocumented members of our community at unprecedented risk. The threat to students and workers requires a concrete and tangible response from the university. Words and symbolic gestures would not suffice. They're pointing to a 2011 memo, which they believe shows that immigration officials cannot enter college campuses without permission from the university. But in a statement to Newsweek, a Brown University official disputing that, but saying Brown is still committed to supporting undocumented members of its community. This on the heels of 7 major cities reaffirming their commitment to remain sanctuary cities, shielding those here illegally from deportation. So, Chris, I went to one of these universities. I went to Columbia University. The great arrogance of Ivy League students and their schools is that they don't allow ROTC on campus. I always found that so insulting, so arrogant. So you're not going to let members of the military go to top-tier universities, but you're going to let undocumented immigrants in.
Well, and I assume that in this case, they're also talking about people who work in janitorial services and on staff and people like that. And part of the reason I'm kind of heartbroken about my country after this election is that we lack the peace that comes with understanding. And the peace that comes with understanding is the fact that the people who populate these Ivy League universities have no idea about what's going on in the rest of the country. And the shock and horror that greets Donald Trump's election. I wasn't shocked when Donald Trump won because I know those voters. That's where I'm from. I understand how people who feel left behind, left out, excluded, and chosen against, how they feel. So I have a proposal. And I think that it's going to work great. On the North Fork of Short Creek Road in Ohio County, West Virginia, is the Roehrig Sanitation Landfill. And I knew of people who work there, and they used to drink at the Bucket of Blood Saloon. I don't know if the Bucket of Blood is still there, but I have an idea.
Wasn't that the saloon in Tangled?
I didn't see Tangled, but I bet.
I'll get your copy.
I'm for it. So But the idea is that everybody at those schools ought to go work at the Rohrig landfill, because they shut down the coal mine and the steel mill is not operating, but they can go work at the Rohrig landfill, and they can put up that trash for a while. And I bet that when they are done, they will do two things. They will really like recycling, and number two, they will not be afraid of people who voted for Donald Trump, and they will not be afraid of people who come from places like that.
I think that won't work. They won't do it. They won't do it. I went to Columbia. I know they would never do something like that.
These students are so good and they're so benevolent. And I actually am going to take the opposite stand. I think it's wonderful. I think they should shield as many people as they want in their dorm rooms, including refugees from the Middle East. So if you have families or single men coming over from Syria, I think they can find some nice, cushy, cozy, pre-war, steam-heated buildings.
Yeah, because they're essentially saying, in addition to that, that the police aren't welcome on our campus unless we call you, because that's actually fact, right? That they cannot enter the campus unless they're called or there's a warrant or whatever. So in addition to that, Kennedy, then if there is a problem, who do they call?
Well, it's like anyone else. Like, remember when the protesters were protesting police violence, and then it got violent because a biker gang came up and it started beating the snot of them. They tried to call the police, and they're like, oh, now you want to...
How did those officers in Dallas die? They died defending people who were protesting.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
But it really shows, though, that this, I know what they taught me at Columbia, and I can safely say it was an incredibly liberal school, and I really worry about the indoctrination of young people in this country. There's not even a second perspective given. When I was at Columbia, there was violent Minutemen protests against Minutemen, people from representing them that came to campus, and they have a long history of this, and I just think people have got to take a dose of reality and see what kind of world we're really living in.
I have a question about the expectation in this country of the growing nature of sanctuary. I mean, it's now we have like a purse and matching shoes, because the purse would be the sanctuary cities, and now you've got these sanctuary places on campus that are the matching shoes. And so where else should we anticipate that this sort of safe space making for illegal immigrants in particular will pop up in our nation? I think that's a conversation that we need to have, because if the space is growing greater for them, what does that mean for everybody else?
All right, the election results, a big blow to many Democrats, especially members of President Obama's team. So he says he told them they could mope for up to 2 weeks if they really need to. Really?
Where's my Bic? Everybody hurts, and right now Democrats are really feeling it. In fact, President Obama is admitting he gave his staff some much-needed time to be sad after Hillary Clinton's loss. But he put a limit on it because he is a taskmaster. Listen to what he said on a DNC conference call.
Expected losses are hard enough. Unexpected ones are just worse, and that's okay. I was telling my team, you're allowed to mope for a week and a half, maybe 2 if you really need it. But after that, we got to brush ourselves off and get back to work. We got to come together and focus on a way ahead.
So these are the people who were going to lead the country with Hillary Clinton and vision and in support and all of that.
He
was kind of teasing, number one, and number two. You know, Teddy Roosevelt talked about the man in the arena. When you get in the space and when you fight and you lose, it hurts, and it hurts badly. And there is nothing quite like the sting, as the president said, of an unexpected defeat. And for the Romney people, I mean, there were real tears in Boston in 2012 because they thought they were going to win.
2 weeks?
Yeah.
I think he was funning a little.
Maybe moping is key for drinking.
I just think...
Bendy elbows is what you're saying.
Megan's actually been through it.
Yeah, and you want to know what happened the next morning? Both my parents said, buck up. You've got a great life. You're totally blessed. We're blessed. We're going to still fight for this country.
Thank you.
The next morning. So I don't have a lot of time for this baby crying, and I have brothers serving. My brother redeployed after that. Give me a break. 2 weeks? What? I mean, it's the infantilization, if that's a word. It's the infantilization of babies, making everyone babies. We have to mope and cry over everything all the time.
But you have a job to do. I'm okay with the president joking about this, but you have a job to do that somebody is paying you for. Get back to work.
And literally, I'll say it again, buck up, Democrats. This isn't Syria. Buck up. Come on. Stop crying.
This isn't Syria.
You're saying it's staff.
If you set the expectations low enough, this isn't Syria, then everything is working out
Well,
fine.
have a little perspective about what's really going on in the world.
There you go.
Yeah, try being a libertarian once again. I know, seriously. When have we ever celebrated?
Perfect track record.
Join a think tank, write a white paper, go have some bourbon. And thank you so much to Chris Steiwald.
Are you staying on the line?
You know it. I wouldn't miss it.
Okay,
of course.
cool.
Extraordinary. And of course, we're staying right here for Outnumbered Overtime on the web. Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/outnumbered. And don't forget, this show is back on TV tomorrow at noon Eastern.
Gonna be
and one
big.
of the best parts of the day happening now starts